A lot of times what happens is the blade spins away from you and the board gets in a bind and pinches. A lot of people will set up a board in between two sawhorses and try to cut in the middle. The first thing happens when it starts cutting, it's going to bind on this blade. That's where you get your kickback from. This thing, you can hold it. The best thing to do is when you're holding it, make sure you grip it real tightly so it don't jump out of your hand. That way,
I'm just showing them, pull it up. This is a list of the top 5 most dangerous tools there is. A circular saw is one of the top 5. Ladders, chainsaws, nail guns, and a table saw. And y'all gonna be using, aren't y'all gonna use nail guns? Or do they?
No, we don't use nail guns.
Table saws?
No table saws.
Well, they're using one of the 5.
you'll be using a circular saw, correct?
We use a circular saw, we use
drill.
battery-powered drills, we have a band saw, and we have rotary tools, different kinds of rotary tools that spin at in excess of 10,000 RPM.
And a drill press.
And a drill press.
Yeah. But like I said, the most people that get hurt with the circular saw is because you set the board up between two sawhorses or your table or whatever and try to cut through the middle. And that causes the board to collapse, and when it does, it puts pressure on the blade, and it's not spinning fast enough that the pressure of that blade, it'll stop the blade and it'll kick it back out of your hand. That's how people get hurt. And another thing people like to do on the construction site is you'll see them, they'll take a board and stick in between here to pin this safety guard back. Don't ever do that. Because what's going to happen when you pin this safety guard back? The whole time that blade's sticking out. We had to go on a job to help at the Easter Seals of West Georgia. One of the framers that was on the job had his saw just like this. I'm so used to using one that the safety guard goes down. When I got through with his saw, he was placing it on the ground upside down like this. So the blade's sticking up in there. Every time he turned it over, well, I wasn't paying attention. I got through. As soon as I set it down, the saw went running across the concrete, cut a big old gap in the concrete. If I hadn't been paying attention when I turned it loose, and somebody been standing in front of me, it'd probably cut. But that's one of the main things. Don't ever modify your tools. Keep you from getting hurt also.
Sitting here, stupid question, but kind of what I've always been curious about. Is there like a proper stance when you're operating one of those things? I mean, how do you hold it?
I always just try to stand either beside. A lot of times you'll see when I'm cutting, you can reach up and grab this. The reason people pin this is when you start to cut, it's harder for you to push it through the wood with the safety guard. So a lot of people hold this up, get it started, and then cut the wood. And I always try to stand over the top of it, and that way I watch my blade cut on the line that we have marked on the wood. They have these little gauges here that will also cut on there. But I just try to, once it goes into the wood and this drops down and the wood holds it up, then you want to grab it with 2 hands firmly. This saw right here has a safety trigger that you have to hold down to pull the trigger. You got to push it to one side before you pull it. A lot of them you just pull the trigger. But that's what I always stand over the top of it and look down.
Can we do this real quick? I got one of these up.
Go ahead.
All right. 30,500 injuries each month. Now this is one reason why we push safety glasses.
Designed to protect eyes from sharp, high-impact objects. To demonstrate, we put our dozens of regular eyeglasses in our friend pose hazards to our eyes, the most fragile, exposed parts of our body. Not only did the glasses fail to protect his eyes, the lenses themselves created their own particles. It's also common to see people depending on sunglasses for eye protection. Again, not only inadequate as protection, but adding to the hazard when hit with an object. And even some of those things we think are safety glasses don't protect our eyes like they should. A pretty high price to pay for some companies' decision to sell shoddy imitations. To put it simply, if they don't have the ANSI, ANSI, ANSI Z87 stamp on them. Don't gamble your precious eyesight on them. Sometimes you have to look closely to see it, but it's worth your effort to find the stamp.
They're on these, ones we issue.
It's also important to note that these have side shields. Many injuries to people wearing regular glasses came from the side. So let's see how well ANSI-rated safety glasses hold up to a nail gun. Note off to the right the muzzle of the nail gun. It's at point-blank range. Quite an impact, but not an eye injury. And with a different pair of ANSI-rated glasses. See that dimple? What a difference from regular glasses or from the so-called safety glasses that weren't ANSI-rated. And a third pair of ANSI-rated glasses. And a third success. It's pretty impressive. But what's even more impressive? Some of these glasses cost less than $7. Not much more than most of us can find in the cushions of our living room furniture. Seems like a pretty simple choice, doesn't it? $7 for something that will protect our eyes from a 16-penny nail fired at close range. Compare that to others. Regular glasses won't protect you, neither will sunglasses, or the fake safety glasses that only give you a false sense of protection. It really is an easy choice when you know what to look for. But I was curious, just how good are these safety glasses? So I asked John Crossman, shooting coach and instructor with the National Rifle Association, to help me out. Ouch, that was quite an impact. And poor Yorick. At first it didn't look like the bullet went through the glasses, but what happened was the lens material closed back up as soon as the bullet went through it. The important lesson, of course, is that a pair of safety glasses by themselves won't protect against all the hazards in the workplace. It's important to choose the right kind of eye protection. Handling chemicals, using a grinder or a lathe, welding, you'll want more appropriate eye protection. But for the majority of workplace situations, just a simple pair of ANSI-approved safety glasses will keep your very precious and very vulnerable eyesight protected. And it's important to remember that there is no substitute for practicing safety at all times. Let me return to that statistic. 90% of workplace eye injuries would have been prevented simply by wearing proper eye protection. That would have emptied all of these seats in the Tacoma Dome and still left 2,000 to 3,000 more in these seats over here. Again, each and every month of the year. But it's worth asking, would we still have that many eye injuries if, just by the act of putting on eye protection, people were more aware of eye hazards and unsafe practices where they work? Then maybe we could, month after month, keep these seats just as empty as they are now. Because eye injuries are about more than some temporary pain, medical bills, and some days off from work. They're about people losing part or all of their ability to enjoy the beauty we're surrounded by and often take for granted every day. It's about being unable to fully enjoy those things that used to make our lives so enjoyable.
Now, the reason we're focusing on eye protection is because that right there is the biggest problem we have. It's the biggest problem they have in construction. It's actually one that, it's not just in construction when we have safety training. We have it everywhere. I don't know a business that doesn't have some type of escape plan and doesn't go through safety training. The reason we're doing this is because we don't be fooled by the size of the tools you're using. Because it's a Dremel doesn't mean that it can't blind you. One of the things y'all gonna use is a cordless drill. How many of y'all ever use these? So, everybody here know how to use them? Take the bits out, take the batteries out, change them, you know how?
Yes.
All right, now, have you ever seen a drill bit explode?
Yeah.
I heard a couple of yeses. Drill bits, this box right there. Drill bits are hard as steel. They don't bend, they explode, they shatter. If you grind them in the right place, they're gonna shatter. and you've got a small, tiny piece, sometimes no bigger than a grain of sand, and it lodges in your eye. If you get it out quickly, usually your eye heals. If you don't, and it starts to rust, then you got another issue. And there have been quite a few people blinded by drill bits. Now, he shows you the ANSI-approved glasses, and that's what y'all are gonna be issued, is ANSI-approved glasses. It'll take an impact. There's nothing that y'all gonna use that it won't stop, if you got them on. I'm not talking about on top of your head, I'm not talking about hanging in your pocket, I'm not talking about the back of your head, I'm not talking about hanging in your collar. And I guarantee you that there's probably gonna be 3 people in here that are gonna be asked to leave this program because they can't keep the safety mask on. Because what I've encouraged them to do is give you one warning, and the second time. In the business I was in, they didn't give you a warning. The first time you took them off, you were fired. It's that simple. Now, they're gonna, I guess they will issue y'all a warning. We got little warning tags in that we use, we write you one. If I was them, I would not take, it's like construction. If, you know, we would rather see you gone than we had injured. And it's nothing personal. If you can't take care of your own safety, if you're not conscious of what you're doing, odds are you're gonna hurt somebody else. Bless you. Okay, we've gone over the cordless drills, we've gone over the saws and jigsaws. Now, once again, this is one where people get hurt quite a bit because they just don't think it's that dangerous. And actually, if you go out and try to Google this and find accidents with a jigsaw, you're not gonna find it. Because it is one of the safest saws there is to use, but we have had people cut themselves with it. Not severely, but enough that it hurts. Because most of the time, they would stick their finger somewhere around the blade. A circular saw, a jigsaw, any type of saw, if you don't line your hand up with the blade, you can't be cut. Most people get cut with circular saws because they line their hand up with the blade and cut toward it. Same thing with a jigsaw. How many of y'all know how to change the blade in a jigsaw? Now, we've got 2 up here, and both of them change differently. I've got a 3rd one out there, the blade changes differently. But it's, most of the time, it's just common sense. They will have something, this has got a picture of a little blade on it. You pull it forward, you stick the blade in, you let it go, and it's in. The Bosch is more complicated. Pull the top up and turn it. Slide the blade in and turn this until you hear it click and lock it back. You can change the angle. As you pull this down, it's variable speed. The further you pull it down, the faster it gets. The only thing I can tell you is you make sure when you start your cut that it's down flat, your blade is not touching your material, you let it reach speed, then you start into your material. And you pull the trigger harder if you want to cut faster according to the material that you're working with. If it's thick material, you're not going to pull it all the way down. You're going to let it cut slower. Now, I'm sure they will go with blade selection with y'all because they'll have blades ready for you. But y'all gonna be working on campus. If you ever have a question about anything that you're doing, don't use one of these tools if you have a question. Me and Mr. McCrainer down here, I'm usually here late every day. Knock on the door, I'll go over any tool they're using. So if you have questions, you've been in this room, you know where I am, you know what I look like. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been training people to do this for a long time. And we've never had an injury. I've been here for 22 years, and we've never had an injury. I tell you something, there's not many schools you can say that. Okay, now, as far as power tools go, which ones do you want to go with besides those 3? Power tools, I mean, we've got a reciprocating saw up here, but I didn't know how much y'all were gonna use those.
We've got a reciprocating saw with a battery on the back of it.
Okay. Mike, do you have, did I get yours? He's got one, I wanna get something similar to the one y'all are using. Now, are they gonna use any electric drills and all, or is it just gonna be cordless drills?
We do have electric drills, and we've
Okay.
got those rotor zip things down there too.
Now, if y'all gonna use electric drill, and this is a really not good example, actually, I don't even use this except to show people. Because, you know, if you drop that out of a boat, you can't have a reasonable anchor. Other than that, it's worthless. So we use it for stuff like this. But This is reversible. It does have, you know, we have, this one right here is actually a keyless chuck. Now, on most drills, it's not. But the thing about this is it has a lot more torque than that. So when you start drilling with it, you stand a better chance of the bit either shattering. 2 times while we were in competition with other schools, we watched them hold something in their hand and drill through the back. The bit would be out the other side of the hand. Because they were pushing on it, and they grabbed it with their hand and pushed on it to get the bit to go through, and when it did, it went straight through. That bit's not gonna slow down when it's your hand, it's gonna go straight through. We were standing there watching the bit sticking out of the back of his hand, and we took it out, and, you know, they carried him over to the hospital. But now, this was in competition. These were people that knew what they were doing. They got in a hurry, because they wanted to win. And that's what happened. They reached over, they did something they know they shouldn't have. Don't line your finger up with a blade, don't line your hand up with a bit. If you don't stick your hand where it doesn't belong, you cannot get hurt. If you keep your glasses on, you're not gonna get anything in your eye. Are any of y'all shooters? You know what I'm talking about. If you blink, you've lost sight of where it's going. If you take those glasses off, I mean, you stand a good chance. You wouldn't do it with a gun, don't do it with these power tools. Now, the saws all y'all gonna be using are reciprocating saws like this. It's battery powered, but this blade right here is called a remodeling blade. It'll cut right through nails, conduits, 2x6s. How many of y'all think your finger's as tough as a 2x6? It's not. On each one of these saws, if you do any work on it, the first thing you do is you take the battery out, always. Now this one, because it's a Makita, the battery slides out the front. You mash the button, and it will come out. And you take it out. If you're gonna change the blade, if you're gonna work on it, if you're gonna do anything, take the battery out. It cannot operate. Now I heard some of y'all laughing just a minute ago about the guy with the nail gun pointing and pulling the trigger. I've seen that 1,000 times. Guy's nail gun won't fire. He looks at the end of it and starts pulling the trigger to see what will happen. Most of the time it won't fire unless it's a defective gun. Same thing with here. You take this battery out, it cannot hurt you. You unplug this cord, drill cannot hurt you. If you don't, I mean, you only get one chance. An injury, I mean, there's certain, you know, it may not look bad, but you can lose part of the feeling in your hand, you can lose part of the use of your hand, and you don't want to do that just because 3 seconds to take this battery out. Reach over and unplug it. Get somebody to plug it back in. Don't ever change the blades or adjust one of these with the battery in it. Now, this one, same thing. All these saws are just basically the same thing. Make sure that it's flat. Don't let it tilt, don't get it up, make sure it's flat. Don't let your blade touch the material. Start the saw and then ease into it. Now, most of these saws, you can pull the blade out and reverse it, and it'll cut either way. We do it all the time. It depends on what you need to do. But once again, all you have to remember, don't line your finger up with a blade and you can't get hurt. Make sure when you clamp your material down that it's not on what you're cutting. We've got a saw, one here and one outside. The cords are not in the saws anymore. They cut them off while they were working. They ran the cord under where they were at, and they cut it in half. You gotta look at where your cords are, you gotta look at what you're cutting on. Clamp your material down, make sure that your saw blade is not gonna hit it. We have some metal saw horses out there. We got guys over here working with us that were sent over here by a contractor. Each one of them had about 20 years of experience, and they cut our metal saw horses up with circular saws. Because they just didn't look at where they had the material from. Now, one of them was pulling metal shards out of his stomach because when it hit, it stuck in it. Okay. 50,000 injuries a year. This one is used for framing. Now, what y'all gonna use is it's gonna be smaller hammers. I'm gonna use this one because I think everybody can see it. Now, if you're driving for power, you're gonna swing from your elbow. If you're driving for control, you're gonna swing from your wrist. And most of y'all gonna be doing that. It's you're gonna use light, you're gonna basically aim your hammer. All you gotta do is make sure that your hand is not anywhere on the table. Because we did, once again in competition, we had somebody hold the nail up and ask another person on his team to hit it. And he did. Broke both fingers, well, thumb and finger. It happens. I mean, it's not unusual. I mean, I see people laughing, but I mean, we watched this happen. The same student, not 5 minutes later, stepped on a board with a nail sticking up out of it that he had thrown on the ground. Don't pay attention to what they're doing. And it's real simple. If somebody's got their hand on the table, we did it. I take that back. We did have one injury here years ago. He did get his hand broken because he was leaning over where somebody else was driving the nail. And the hammer glanced off the nail and hit the top of the hand. It was something that shouldn't happen. Don't get, once again, if you don't put your hand in a place where it can be hit, you can't be hurt. But when you swing a hammer, you gotta make sure that the face comes down flat and level, and that's all you gotta worry about. If it comes down flat and level, we kept a pair of safety glasses here for years that had a hole almost all the way through right in the center. It was with a nail, and somebody was driving the nail, and when he hit it, he was at an angle, and the nail popped out. He happened to, I had just made him put his safety glasses back on. Now, from what I understand, y'all gonna use these quite a bit. Anybody name these? 10 cents. Getting close. Aviation steps. Why do they have different colors?
One's right curve, left curve, and one's straight.
You cut right, left, or straight, according to which direction you want to cut with the steps. And from what y'all are doing, I would imagine that this is gonna be a widely used tool. Can you hurt yourself with them? You cut yourself with what you're cutting, what you're working on, if it's metal. Not only that, if this thing slips, and we see this quite often, when they start cutting with it, and one of them get their finger up in here close enough to actually pinch it on the finger. Limeless pliers are the worst, and I would imagine y'all gonna use those too. Any type of plier that you get your hand down around the end of it, when it clamps down, any of you ever had those little blood pockets pop up on your hand when you pinched it real hard? We see that all the time, especially in electrical trades using pliers, because they get their hand, they're holding something in their hand, they're mashing it, and it pops through. You know, it hurts. But there again, you're worried about infection, because some of the stuff you're working on, some of the tools you're working with, you got a big chance of picking up infection. Now, which ones do y'all wanna, now, I don't know if y'all ever use these.
Yes.
Now, this is a scratch off. It can be used as a scribe, it can be used to start screws, it can be used as a drift pin, it can be used for all sorts of things. This is one tool that I carry everywhere I go, because you can use it for 1,000 different things. It may not be very big, but it's one of those things, like, you ever tried to drill on something and the bit kept moving, set it there and it run over here, you set it, this right here will stop it. All you gotta do is take it and tap it where you want the bit to go in, and you got a pit for it to sit in, and it will go straight through. That's one of the things I want y'all to watch where you're doing it. Screwdrivers, you know what these are? Vice grips or locking jaw pliers. Now, think about what that's gonna do to your hand if you play with that. It hurts. The thing with pliers, the thing with any of these tools, if you don't put your hand down where you can hit it, if you don't line your fingers up with it, it's impossible for you to be hurt. That's the only thing that we're gonna encourage y'all to do. Keep your glasses on, and you don't ever line your hand up. If you're swinging a hammer, don't put your hand down on the table close to what you're swinging. No matter what you're doing, if you're using a saw, don't put your hand in front of the blade in the direction you're cutting. Now, we've got a couple really good videos on here, just short clips of somebody, the guy was he was stripping wire with a utility knife and pulled it back like this, and it opened him up all the way across the stomach. And a utility knife's got a blade on it right on. It's not an exacto blade. And I know all of y'all are gonna be using exacto blades working on this. Don't pull it towards your body. Don't pull it towards your fingers. Don't pull it towards your hand. Don't ever put your hand in line with a blade, with a blunt, with anything you're swinging, and you can't be hurt. I mean, it's that simple.
Like in Boy Scouts, when you do the totem chip, certifies you to use knife blades, one of the rules is that you always cut away.
Always. But one of the things that we run into is, and one reason why a lot of companies have outlawed utility knives is we have a large number of electricians that would hold stuff in their hand and try to strip it, and they would split the entire palm open, or they would hold it right here and try to strip it, and they would bleed to death before we could get them to a hospital. And these are skilled people. But if you cut towards your body, if with a saw, a blade of any kind, you stand a chance of getting hurt. If you put your hand down when you're swinging, you can hurt you, injure your hand. I mean, that's the only thing. If you do what we ask you to do, it's impossible to be hurt. But if you forget for just a second, and you don't think about what you're doing, the next move could be your finger missing, or the tip of your finger, or a broken nose, or a hole in your face, or something sticking out of your eye. And once it pierces your eye, the chance of you getting back 100% of your sight is almost, you won't get 100% back. If you do get part of it back, but now, you want us to go over, I mean, we have more hand tools and more power tools if you want to keep going.
I think we've covered everything. We did not cover, guys, if you use the drill press and you use the bandsaw, you will have to have specific training and be signed off on those.
Well, I mean, I would have brought those in here. Now, I did bring this in here, but I didn't know if y'all used it or not.
We're not using
Which
that.
is,
Right
yeah.
on, that,
But now, as a drill press, same thing with a drill press. You gotta make sure you see where your bit's going down. That drill press with that metal table, I see some of y'all with your phones out. Put your phones in your pockets, because if you're on that phone, you're not listening to me at all. It's a proven fact, and some of y'all are intelligent enough to know, you can't do two things at one time. You can't listen to me and text at the same time. It's impossible. Now, you may think you can multitask. You're not multitasking, you're doing one or the other. You may be doing it quickly, but you're still doing one or the other. Studied way too much psychology. Seen way too many tests to prove that. And then we see it every day. Drill press will shatter a bit faster than any one of these drills up here, and it will put it off with more speed and more force. Actually, with enough force to penetrate into your skin, not just your eye, but put a hole in you. You turn it and set it for the speed that you want, and you take it down slow and you let it go through. Make sure it's not hitting the table. Make sure you got it. Don't ever try to hold something in your hand and drill it. Don't ever try to hold it down with your hand. Clamp it, always. Anything you drill or cut, you clamp it. Bandsaws, once again, get it adjusted where you can't get your finger into it, and don't line your finger up with a blade. If y'all do that, you can't not get hurt. When people get hurt is when they don't. They'll line their finger up and they'll shove it, and they shove their finger straight in the blade. Hope it slips. Anybody got any questions? I can see some of y'all, I lost you a long time ago. A couple of y'all that look like you're about to fall asleep. But, like I said, I'll be around.
Show me videos.
Well, I got a couple more over there. We tried to, for some reason, our PowerPoints won't go because I was just gonna do real short ones. Which is like I said, I thought I only had 15 minutes.
Guys, just to reiterate, you will have to have the sheet signed for working 153. Okay? The church. And if we walk in and you don't have your eyeglasses on, then you're gonna be asked to leave. Everybody understand that? Anybody not understand that? If you're cutting something, it needs to be clamped. Whether it's a circular saw, the jigsaw, or whatever you're cutting with a handsaw, make sure it's clamped. If you're drilling something, it's gotta be clamped. You gotta have your eyes protected all the time. That's what we're concerned about, because we can't replace those. It's a lifetime affair. Any questions about that? So work safe, we're gonna have a good time making robots. I'm here to help you.
I'd like to go over once.
I'm here to help you.
You know that?
Guys, be sure and bring your sheets back to your representative at your school. Give him your full attention. He's gonna go through this stuff. He's OSHA certified so that we take the liability off the school if you get hurt. The real intent in working safety is what? Your protection and the protection of our program. So
They're not gonna be putting it on.
If you didn't get a form, raise your hand. If you got one, quiet down for a minute so we can get them out. Hey, look, now, in order to communicate with everybody, if you refuse to listen, you're gonna have to get out of the room. It's that simple. Now, when we talk about safety, we do the same thing here that we're gonna do with you. When we talk about safety, we want your attention. If we don't have your attention, you're disrupting somebody else, you get out. Now, this is a result of somebody didn't pay attention. This is done with a circular saw. Y'all gonna use circular saws. That's why we're in here. We're gonna try to give you a brief rundown on all these tools. Now look at the paper that you got in your hand. I want you to read it to yourself now. Y'all want to put them on top of your head, you want to stick them in your pocket, you want to hang them on your collar, you want to put them everywhere where it's supposed to be. Now this seemed to be a problem at one time or another with a few people that have been in this program. That's one reason why we decided to do this. If you can't keep your safety glasses on, well, we got an interesting picture that's coming up later with somebody with a piece of metal hanging out of their eye. Now this didn't come off of one of these, it came off a Dremel. And y'all know what a Dremel is? Little bit tool that was long. It was a wire that came off a wire brush and embedded in his eye. You take these off, you stand a chance of losing your vision in one of both eyes. The grinding on rock on a Dremel will shatter just like the grinding rock on any grinder, sander will. If it shatters, it goes off in pieces. Drill bits, and some of the bits are hard as steel. They don't bend, they shatter, they explode. I have a friend now that's blind in one eye because he took his safety glasses off while they were drilling, it exploded. It shot 1.25 inches deep in his eye. Now these will save your vision. They may be a little hard to wear at first, but after you have them on for a while, you'll even forget that you got them on. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a brief rundown on each one of these tools. We're gonna show basically how to adjust, basically what they are, and like I said, I thought we were geared for 15 minutes, so I set this up to be quick. But now we're gonna extend it out because I'd rather have more time anyway. But we're gonna go a little bit more than what I intended to. Now, like I said, the one that y'all gonna use the most is this. Circular saw. This is battery power. If you make any adjustments on this saw, you slide the battery out. Now, it doesn't make any difference which way it comes out. They have different locks on them. Just look for what you press to release. I don't care if it's up under here, on the back, or whatever. You can get it out. In order to adjust this like it's supposed to be, you need the depth of your material. You need no more than 1/8 of an inch of that blade sticking through the depth of your material when you block the blade. And that's on any circular saw. Can anybody give me a reason why? Why?
The saw hits the ground, it could shatter or send something flying.
If you slip and you've only got 1/8 of an inch of that blade showing, what's it gonna do to your finger?
1/8 of an inch.
It's just gonna cut it. If you've got 1.5 inches of blade showing, what's it gonna do to your finger? You can pick it up and put it in your pocket and take it with you. Now, we did, one of these, and I wish I could find it, but like I said, we were gearing this for 15 minutes. But they do have a video on here where the guy was, they actually picked his finger up, wrapped it up in paper, and took it to the hospital with him. It shows him while he's unconscious, and they're taking us and breaking it out of his finger so they could reattach his finger. And they did put it back on. He'll never bend it again, but they did put it back on. So what we're gonna do, like I said, we're gonna go, well, we're gonna start with hand tools because that's the ones where most people don't think is dangerous. Now, the paper that's going around has a set of tools listed on it. One of them is a screwdriver. Now, most of y'all don't think these are dangerous, and in most circumstances there aren't. But if you slip you've got your hand there on the table and you slip. We do have one picture where a guy stuck it all the way through his finger. Hammers. How many injuries do y'all think result? There had to be medical attention on hammers every year.
Tons.
Anybody? We got 10,000. Anybody else? From hammers. I mean, you know, we got ball peening, we got framing, we got soft face. I mean, we can have a collection of hammers up here. How many injuries a year are directly related to medical attention? Not just something they put a Band-Aid on, but medical attention every year. 50,000. Dead on. That's how many injuries every year they have from hammers. Well, I mean, it's, you know. Well, but even, you know, and that actually is one of the highest reported injuries with any tool. Now, we've got a list on here of the 5 deadliest tools that anybody can use. And y'all gonna be using one of them. And it's the circular saw. Now, we've got several different types up here. We have a worm drive, we've got a straight drive, and we've got that. Any of these saws, this right here is one of the most important things, but most of the time when we go places, we see people that pull it up and they wired it open. They tied it down but it will not close. This is the guard that will drop back over your blade. Make sure it works. When you pick that saw up, make sure it's down. You can set the angle just by loosening this and tilt it to the angle you want. It's got a gauge right here. Now I need you looking at me, seriously, because if I see you not paying attention, you didn't understand what I said. And now, they're gonna give you power tools. That's been understood. And when you walk out of here, if there's something that you don't understand, you need to ask before you leave, because you're gonna have to adjust these. All these operate the same way. If you see a scale right here, that's where you set your angle. Whatever knob is around it, it's gonna allow you to set the angle. If you look on the back, usually you're gonna see something where you can loosen, and you can adjust it here. You can drop it down. Now, whenever you're gonna cut something, bring your guard up, set it down on your material, and raise it until you have 1/8 of an inch of the blade sticking through and then lock it down. And it won't move. You only got that much blade showing. Most of the time, you're gonna see, you're gonna have that much blade showing, that's where they're gonna lock it. If that runs across your hand, you just lost your fingers. And I watched the guy on the job one time hold something in his hand to trim it off, and he cut ends off all 4 fingers. Now, this man was not your age. He had been doing this for years, but he just didn't think for a second. Lopped off one of his fingers. It's easy to do. You may think it's not, but it is. 1 second without thinking about what you're doing, without watching it saw, and you're gonna cut your fingers off. A kickback. I wish I had it. I didn't pull those videos up on a kickback. You take over a second, let me see if I can find it. There's a man that actually, the kickback, y'all understand what I'm talking about when I say kickback? Well, some people do. Now, if you're cutting something and you place one end on a solid surface and the other end, and you try to cut down the middle, what's gonna happen? It's gonna close in on the blade, and it's gonna cause what we call a kickback. The saw will literally throw itself backwards. Now, if your guard works like it's supposed to, usually all you're gonna get is, you'll get a bruise, knocked out tooth, broken nose. But if the guard doesn't close fast enough, the blade's gonna embed in you. And that's where we wind up with some serious injuries. We've got one on here where the guy actually has the entire saw blade embedded in his chest. And that's where they held it while they could get him to the hospital. Now, we're not trying to scare y'all. Seriously. If you operate a tool like you're supposed to do, I've been doing this for years. Mr. McCrane, how long have you been at this? How many years have you been in the trades? I've never had an accident at work, ever, because I'm careful about what I do. I've worked with electricians, I've worked with pipe welders, I've worked with iron workers, I've worked with carpenters, I've worked with masons, and several other professions. I've never been hurt at work. I'm real careful about what I do. I know safety and I pay attention to it. Now, they did give y'all a little bit of a rundown on what we do. But I stayed in the trades for years before I became a teacher. I had a degree in education while I was still working as a construction worker. I liked the work, I stayed in it. Me and Mr. McCrane both have had the OSHA 10-hour, OSHA 30-40. I went back and got the 510 and the 500, so I can actually issue cards. But to do that, we've had extensive training on the job and off the job, because most construction jobs run us through training other than that. We have to be certified just to operate a nail gun. We have to be certified to drive forklifts. We have to be certified to do just about anything. The nail guns that we fire, we have to be certified to use them. So we've gone through more training than just this. Now, is there anybody, the most important thing I want you to remember about this is adjusting the depth. Now, what's the first thing you look for if you're gonna adjust the depth? Most of the time, if you see this, that's where you're gonna set your angle at. Usually, somewhere around the back, you're gonna find a release that will allow you to set the depth of the blade. How deep do you wanna set it? And then the thickness of the material you're cutting. Make sure no more than 1/8 inch. If you slip, you would rather be able to put a Band-Aid on it or go get a few stitches than you had to pick your fingers up. Because, I mean, it's an odd feeling when you look over and somebody's fingers are lying on the ground. And it doesn't have to be a real big saw to do it. But once again, we're not trying to scare you. I've used these thousands and thousands of times. I've never been hurt. Mr. McCrane's never been hurt because we pay attention to what we're doing. Just a minute, let me find that video.
Who hasn't
I
signed
think
the
you've seen
paper?
that.
Who hasn't signed
have
the
it.
paper? That's a really bright thing. There's one right there.
Right
I got a question on the slide.
Yes.
Well, being that anybody who's familiar with chainsaws might actually be familiar with what exactly
Why don't you hold
Yeah,
it
now,
for him?